these memories come back to me as you're talking, and according to our producer, a lot of the folks watching these programs remember the 70s, and so I'm hoping that at least some of them will remember fondly Dean Ogden like we do. I'm not the one being interviewed here, but the thing about Dean Ogden that struck me, particularly in light of what you said about Bob Martin, is anything that I did as a faculty member that was commendable, Dean Ogden never failed to commend me for it. I mean, he a little handwritten note. Mm-hmm. I saw that one of your, that you had an article published. Congratulations, keep up the good work. And, for a 20-something faculty member, mm-hmm. that just meant more than, a bonus would mean in your salary, I guess. Maybe not.
But he paid a lot of attention, maybe just in our department, but I was informed that he noticed that he thought I had given too many A's in a class.
Oh my.
But then he noticed I was teaching a second section of the same class. It was probably Intro to American Government, and I had not given so many A's in that class, so he thought it was okay. This must have been a really good class and not just me being too nice to the students.
Of course, you and I worked for a couple of memorable department chairs, Dwinell Pettengill and Malcolm Moore, in those days. Any memories of those that you've brought to mind?
He was actually ahead of his time. Dwinell, Dr. Pettengill, was sort of ahead of his time in some ways because he was very much opposed to smoking. I think he'd had a lung removed maybe or something. And so at one point out in the Combs building, this would have been I think the second floor of the Combs building, he was out there painting no smoking signs on the wall, just on his own. And later I noticed those signs had been painted over, but he would have loved the campus today because we're basically we are smoke-free in all the buildings.
Back in those days, I hate to admit it, but I smoked a pipe. And actually smoked a pipe in class, mm-hmm. and
it was a very professorial thing for men to do.
Yeah, but EKU then and now, I think that's a very stark and welcome change, mm-hmm. That we do have a smoke-free campus, and for any of you concerned about me, I gave up the pipe many years ago, so I'm going to be fine in that regard. Any memories of Malcolm Moore? Not many of our viewers will have heard of him, but he was a department chair throughout much of the 70s. And
actually just 3 years, I believe.
Well, the mid 70s then, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he introduced me to my husband. I guess he was best man at my wedding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was my big fond memory of him.
Jane's husband, many of you know, Dr. Glenn Rainey, who still teaches in the Department of Government, for many years the director of EKU's Institute of Government. Can you think of some of going back to Bob Martin, what would you say were some of the major contributions he made to the campus and to the university?
Well, obviously building the infrastructure, getting us university status was the two big things. I think in a lot of ways he did care about students. He was a little dictatorial in the way he did things, but I think he just the whole thing with graduation, for example. I mean, we got terribly tired of sitting through these long graduations, but he had the sense that for people who were first-generation college students, this meant a lot to their families to see them walk across the stage and have their name called out. And I could understand why he didn't mm-hmm. want to give that up. Also, back in those early years, we had some interesting people come to campus. I don't know how much he directly had a hand in this, but they used to have freshman assembly, which everyone hated, but because we had to be there. But he would bring in political candidates. I heard the gubernatorial candidates the year that I came spoke at freshman assembly, and they would have some maybe a dance group or musicians or something to sort of expose freshmen to what college life could be about. And we had some interesting speakers back in those days. One sort of interesting one, Julian Bond, the civil rights activist, mm-hmm. came to speak. And there's a kind of funny memory about that with President Martin. They had, if you wanted to ask Julian Bond a question, you had to write it out on a little card. And so someone had collected these cards at the end of the speech. And Bond was kind of standing there, and President Martin, who was a very big, hefty guy, was sort of leaning down to take these cards. And he'd already given the first bunch to Bond, and he was sort of leaning down there. And so Julian Bond picks up the first question. First question that some student asked him was, what do you think of the way President Martin runs this university? And you could just see Martin just freeze, this sort of look of horror on his face. And Bond handled it very well. He said his father had been a college administrator, and there were ups and downs and so forth. So he was quite diplomatic about it.
He also said you got a lot of good books in your library, probably. Huh?
Something like that, right?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people in the last few months about Dr. Martin, and I think his legacy has become more and more positive with the passing of years. And I think what you said about, in his own way, he really did care about EKU students. He seemed to understand what this meant to them, and the things that he did. Of course, his skill with getting money out of the legislature was notable as well.
Let me say one other thing that goes, and this is true from the Martin era right up to now, and I think it's important, and that is because I came here to teach courses in the 60s and 70s on the Soviet Union and world communism. I have never had any trouble here with academic freedom, with someone saying, oh, you can't talk about that. Mm-hmm. It's never been a problem. When I got into teaching politics and religion, no one has ever said, oh, you're treading on someone's toes, or you're offending people. Never been a problem. Now, I will say that during the Vietnam War, there were people in other departments that did get in trouble with President Martin because he thought that you should only talk about politics in political science classes. And there were a few people who actually did not have their contracts renewed because they discussed the war in math classes or English classes. Mm-hmm. So it was, he could be harsh with faculty sometimes.